It's gonna get real ugly.
You're listening to episode 147 of PHP Ugly, the premier ugly podcast on the internet.
Well,
I'm Tom Rideout.
He's literally stealing our intro from our other show.
With me, as always, is John Congdon.
Oh man, that was rough. This is why we don't let you do the intro. I'm just saying. Oh, I was supposed to say hello.
And in the big office, Eric Van Johnson.
How's everybody doing? Happy to be back.
All day.
We took a week off because of, unfortunate circumstances. John didn't pay his internet bill. But we're back now.
I didn't realize you were supposed to pay that. I thought they just sent you paper to draw on.
This isn't your landscaper. You don't wait for them to send before you decide to pay them. Oh, that's an inside joke. Sorry. Didn't do inside jokes here. All right.
That inside, but
Who is jazzed? This has got to be my favorite time of year. Absolute favorite. I was so psyched to talk about it last week, but then we didn't have a show. But if you didn't know, last week was season opener for minor league baseball. The week before that was the season opener for Major League Baseball. Right now, this is like Thor: The Dark World, where like all those realms line up at a certain time of year. That's what's happened here in the U.S. All the realms have lined up. Right now,
I got to put up with this at the office.
Right now, you have professional baseball, Major League and minor league, which, yes, John has been privy to watch a few games. We have professional basketball. We even have we have
professional alternate.
We have professional hockey going. So those things right there. I mean, it's like every night of the week there's something to watch on television, something good to watch on television. Then you even have a new professional American League football. So it's not that fake football that they call soccer.
Already closed. That's already shut down.
Oh, is it already done?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought they had like 2 or 3 more weeks.
They were supposed to. They cut it early.
They already folded the league? Like the league is?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That's disappointing. Well, anyways, that was unusual. Anyways, we have professional baseball, professional hockey, professional basketball, all going on at the same time here in the U.S.
Ultimate. I went to the opening last weekend.
It's not a real sport.
You weren't kidding. You really could do this podcast without me this week.
Oh my God, it is so awesome! It is so awesome. So
we had professional racquetball today.
We had definitely some professional.
That's not a thing. Definitely not a thing.
John got me back on the racquetball court after a month of relaxation. Man, that was painful.
He was killing you. We took a couple weeks after that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And it's gonna be killing you again tomorrow.
Yep. How's everybody doing? Anybody? I mean, like Thomas, we literally haven't spoken in 2 weeks. What have you been up to? We have gotten requests from listeners. We have gotten a request from listeners to at least try to include some development talk, some coding talk, ideally PHP discussion in every show. So that has to be our goal moving forward because all 3 listeners, we heard from all 3 of them. They said the same thing.
Well, you might remember last month my meetup was canceled because of the bomb cyclone that hit Colorado. So that got pushed back a month to yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
The day that the second bomb cyclone of the year hit Colorado.
Your presentation?
Oh, zinger!
So my presentation has now been delayed by 2 months,
Wait a minute.
and I will be giving my presentation next month.
What happened? What happened yesterday? Because I saw pictures posted from you of trivia night, and it looked pretty calm to me.
That was Tuesday.
It just came across my Facebook. So
Yeah. Tuesday was beautiful. Nice, like 83 degrees, 82 degrees outside in the evening. Really wonderful all day. And then it dipped down later that night to about 10 degrees. And it just sort of stayed that way all through Wednesday, snowing, wind up to 50 miles an hour. Lots of places closed early. School got out 2 hours early.
so you have snow on the ground right now?
Nope. No, today was nice and warm. All the snow melted. It actually snowed today while the snow was melting, and it melted before it hit the ground. So you could see
All
it
that
snowing,
rain.
but there was no accumulation.
Listen, you guys live in Colorado. I find it hard to believe it snowed so hard yesterday that you guys couldn't get to your meetup.
The issue is the combination of a sudden snow, which builds up ice, and the high winds, which push cars off the road on the ice. So it's a matter of everything happening too quickly at once and not getting dealt with. Yeah, it was dangerous to drive. I mean, you could see the roads frosting over and turning into giant blocks of ice. And having driven in that a couple times before, it's very, very unpleasant.
Just buy yourself a Zamboni, you're good to go.
Yeah, I can get to school the next day. It's a swift 2 miles an hour.
So we're talking about your GraphQL presentation?
Well, so now I have just the nicest, most polished presentation, plus a whole code base to demonstrate it, written in React with Apollo and Laravel and Tailwinds. And I'm learning all sorts of stuff about React. It's awesome.
The first thing you need to learn is it's Tailwind. There's not multiple winds. It's Tailwind. It's Tailwind CSS.
All right, Tailwind CSS. So, learning all the WebKit stuff that we've never jumped on at my office, learning a lot of this ins and outs of ESSys. Yeah, Webpack, sorry. It's been really, really nice to take on something fully new and unique, but there have been a lot of like caveats. React is stateful. React knows what it's doing, and it's always running on the client. It's always checking for a change in state and responding to it. So I couldn't figure out how to get something to redirect.
It's not responding to it. It's reacting to it. Come on, nothing. Oh,
I think the whole naming of the framework is just kind of coming on to him. He's just kind of getting his head around it. Blew his mind there, John. Blew his mind.
Sorry, Thomas.
So,
go ahead.
Apology accepted. So, I had an issue where I wanted a form to redirect somewhere else when it was submitted, but I couldn't figure out if the form was already rendered, how do I change the contents of the rendered portion? And I was like, oh, well, you can put in your render statement, you can put, if this is submitted, then do something else, and it'll run because it's always rendering. It's always checking the state and comparing it to the updated state values. And it's a way of thinking that I'm not used to for programming, and I'm really enjoying picking it up piece by piece. But now, yeah, I've got a nice little presentation together, and I've got a functional blog that you can create posts and comments, and all of that's being done through GraphQL.
And you got a whole month to add to it. Look at that.
Which I will. I'm going to add authentication, validation, and a little bit more streamlining on the commenting system.
You need to submit to some conferences, Thomas. GraphQL is all the rage, man.
I don't think I'm in a position where I'm confident enough with my knowledge of GraphQL where you could ask me a question and I could give you an answer. I mean, React, definitely not. I couldn't teach somebody React, but I'm getting better at GraphQL. It's just that GraphQL is just a standard. So a lot of my conversation in the beginning of it, the presentation, is what the standard is. But then when you want to show something, you have to pick somebody's implementation, and that's the implementation you're showing. And that's going to be a little bit different. It's going to have, I mean, one example is that the GraphQL language does not dictate that JSON returns are required. It doesn't say it has to be JSON when you're returning it. It could be anything returned. You know, now everyone uses JSON because, of course, that's what you would use. But, you know, when I pick an implementation to show off, it's going to be different than the specification in some way. So,
so you said you implemented Lighthouse, which is the one I had done. That's the package that comes with Laravel. Well, it doesn't come with Laravel. It's a package designed to run in Laravel. I found it to be very easy to implement. What were your thoughts?
It's very, very easy to implement once you understand how the directives work, how the relationship with models work, and how the query resolution works. And then the latest version of Lighthouse has a builder function, so you can say app GraphQL query, and it will make a new query or mutation or a new type. So it's been really slick to implement. Now my issue is that all of these directives that are defined in Lighthouse are not clearly specified in the GraphQL config file for PHP Storm. So PHP Storm is constantly complaining, I don't know what that directive means. I hope your endpoint does.
Well, that's the problem I have. You mentioned Tailwind as well, which I'm really starting to embrace as somebody who doesn't do a lot of front-end development, and the little bit I do, I'm horrible at. Tailwind is kind of the first.
You said doo-doo.
Tailwind is the first time I've picked something up and been able to manipulate things enough to kind of, like, if I did it for one of our clients where I mocked up a version of their website in Tailwind, and because I had colors, because I had layouts, you know, I could manipulate things using Tailwind to kind of match what they were using. But same thing, PHP Storm just barks about it the whole time. What did you really dive very deeply into Tailwind, or did you just brush over it?
I really brushed over it. I mean, there's not a lot to deep dive into it. It's basically a JavaScript program that takes some pre-compiled definitions and writes them from a Sass file into a CSS file. So it's not doing a whole lot of really magical stuff.
Well,
it's just
but it's very different than Bootstrap. It's a very different approach.
I wouldn't know that. I don't know Bootstrap either.
Okay. Well, it's very different. It's a very different approach.
It's safe to say that messing with Tailwinds is my first time ever messing with CSS beyond just a cursory introduction to the syntax. I do not do design, and I chose Tailwinds because I've seen a lot of what it can do out of the box with just like, I want it to be rounded, so now it's rounded, and I want it to be a different state when you click on it or hover over it. Like it's real simple and pretty right out of the box.
That's the big thing. It's like, you're not like with Bootstrap, you know, you create these button classes where it's like, okay, you know, button is this, and you define all the CSS stuff. And with Tailwind, it's a little bit of a different approach. But I'm liking it. We're using it. We're using it on a project we're working on now. I'm a little nervous about it. And even our developers, who are mainly focused on the front end, their first go around with Tailwind was just flat out resistance. I mean, they were like, we can't build with this. I think it's called a utility first framework or something is how they refer to it. And they our developers were just like, nope, can't do it. Let us use Bootstrap, let us use Bowman. They wanted to use these existing CSS frameworks that are out there, and I'm like, no. I really think the Tailwind's gonna give us more flexibility. Um, and again, I was basing a lot of this on the fact of I saw what I developed with it. I'm like, as bad as I am at this, if I can do what I did, what you guys should be able to do with it should blow me out the water. Now they've kind of gotten their head around it a little bit. They're embracing it a little bit more, able to turn out pages really quick now. So I'm real happy about that. But Tailwind just got its first official release of 1.0. It might not even be released yet. It might still be beta.
No, it is. It's 1.0 now.
Oh, okay, all right. I know it. I know it's like real fresh. Like it was.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's a beta here.
It's beta. Okay, it's still in beta. It's
You'll have to
coming
excuse
out.
me. I'm used to projects that just shoot out 1.0, 1.01, 1.02, 1.03 day after day. I'm not used to a beta thing.
You understand Google is constantly in beta, right? Like every product they release is always beta.
Oh yeah.
Gmail was in beta for what, 10 years before they finally removed the beta flag off of it. So cool.
Thomas, oh, good.
Nope, you go ahead.
No, I was gonna say Thomas mentioned his meetup, so I was gonna move on. But if you had something more about Tailwind, I was letting you go back to that.
Well, Tailwind has just sort of been an afterthought to the whole thing. What I'm throwing together doesn't look very good, even using Tailwind. The thing for me is Apollo. If you're using React or Vue or whatever the other one is, boy,
Angular?
Angular, and you want to interact with GraphQL, then Apollo is the way to go.
Oh, Apollo works with Vue as well, huh?
So Angular, Vue, Meteor, Ember, Polymer, Lit Apollo, native in iOS with Swift, and native Android with Java.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to take a look at that.
It's generally the same JSX style language everywhere, as far as I've seen, but it is complicated. It's a totally different way of thinking about things, but it's so nice and so readable when you start getting into it and you understand what it's doing. You have to contain, like if you have a mutation, which is effectively an update or an insert, you can wrap a whole form with the mutation query, and it will parse out what the inputs on the form are, what the validations for the query are, and what all the endpoints and et cetera are for it. And when you hit submit, it just sends the submit straight from the form to React to Apollo. And then Apollo does the magic with GraphQL, sends back to React, and then shows the form successful or failure. It does a lot of hard work behind the scenes for you. That's just sort of monotonous work, not magic work. So that's my thought. The really interesting thing I've been playing with is Apollo, not necessarily Tailwind or React, but Apollo is very, very interesting. And
do you see yourself using GraphQL on a professional project anytime soon?
Oh, absolutely. I still need to get more familiar with all of the directives that are available. Writing an order by in your query is somewhat harder. But having finally got...
Did you get around to doing authorization?
Not yet, but it's pretty simple. You do authorization on the client side and the server side so that the client doesn't try to do something it can't do. And then on the server side, because of Lighthouse, you just say @auth, and it requires authentication through the standard Laravel middleware.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm anticipating doing it, but it shouldn't be too hard.
John, you're going to carry on with meetups?
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that we had SDPHP last night, and it went really well. We had an oddity. We had more people show up than RSVP.
Oh, that is so weird.
That is unusual.
Especially since we knew at least one of the RSVPs wasn't going to show up anyway. So I was already anticipating less than our normal, like 50%. So our own Marcus Moore did a talk on BHAT, doing BD testing. And it really got me back on that mode of I really need to start testing this way, even though I'm using Codeception instead of BHAT. So I started tinkering around with that again today.
Yeah, I know he's been using BHAT. I'm working on a project with him, and he introduced BHAT, and the I'm not sure what he went into with his presentation, but the idea behind the BHAT implementation, our team had been doing unit testing and having a good amount of success with it. Was real happy with it, but we realized that handing that off to the client still left the client bewildered as to what exactly was being tested, and also was made it difficult for the client to articulate to us what they wanted tested. So we started playing around with the idea of introducing him to BHAT and more specifically the Gherkin language, the Gherkin syntax, and handed it off to them. And I mean, we got some pretty good results from it. They basically wrote some of the tests for us. We were able to implement those tests, and not that we've made a huge deal out of it, but if it ever comes to it, we can go to the client and say, you can actually look at the test and they can understand or have an idea of what's being tested. So it was real
That was
nice.
the big thing was the requirements, was making sure we were building what they wanted. No more of this guessing or having it be something that was said in a phone call. Be write out these test scenarios or these stories and take it back to them and get basically a sign off on that.
Yeah.
And getting them to write them up front is even better. It's like, no, you told us this is what you wanted. You didn't just sign off on it.
Now, you said stories. Have you guys heard of a product called Storybook?
No.
I mean, BHAT has the concept of storybooks, but not as the individual concept or individual product.
I really want to get into this. It was a little late for me to get this implemented in my environment, but it allows you to essentially inspect every element of a React or Vue or Angular project by its method name or by its property or anything like that. So when you load it into a project, it scans everything and says, well, here's a page where you can start just laying stuff out and looking at it and seeing how it reacts when you do something. I really wish I knew somebody who was into this, because it's a fascinating project.
Yeah, I have to look at that one.
Is it storybook.js.org?
Yes, it is.
Interesting.
Make sure you throw that in the show notes.
Yeah, if there's someone out there who's familiar with Storybook and wants to tutor me through the whole thing, that's my next self-learning project is definitely going to be this, because I'd love to be able to inspect an entire project from a sort of bird's eye view.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, I got some coding sort of stuff to talk about if you guys are interested.
Nope, not at all.
Okay, move on.
Just kidding. Eric, what have you got going on?
Nope. The moment.
See, he insisted he was going to carry the show. I didn't realize it was just going to be baseball-related stuff.
Oh, no. Oh, we can talk baseball. You want to talk baseball?
I do not. Certainly don't.
You should not be bringing it up.
It got brought up today in the office between him and another developer, and all I could do was sit there, and I had gotten a delivery, so I had those air bags in there. And I just started popping those, trying to get him to shut up.
Yeah, Eric, behind you, you have some kind of fancy little display that just keeps showing times and dates. And what is this little toy you've got now?
Imagine what you're talking about. People who listen to the podcast will know no ideas. But now that you mention it, yes, I have a couple of toys here. I'm such a geek about this stuff.
We know.
Yeah.
So this here, you give them a little Amazon budget, and it's like gone in a second.
This here is called Lametric, and it's a little smart device that you can attach and have it show. So right now it's showing you different cryptocurrencies and where they're rating. We have
so it's like a physical form of ennui.
This is these are the number of subscribers to our YouTube channel. So you should go and subscribe, and you can watch this number go up. And there's other stuff. The current temperature. Just fun things. It just kind of cycles through a bunch of stuff.
Can it track money lost due to conversations about baseball?
It wasn't less than $50.
Yeah, no, that's too much.
Yeah, it was probably too much for that little device. It was probably too much. This Lametric thing, it wasn't much more than the badge, and I actually, just because the internet is always listening, on my Reddit stream, there an open source version of that came out, which is like $50, but it's a much smaller.
$200?
What are you talking about?
The Lametric?
Was it that much? I don't remember. John paid for it. I don't think it was that much.
You could have bought a Chromebook. You could have bought a Chromebook. This is a much higher resolution display.
Okay, the show is not about what did Eric spend the company's money on, okay? This is not about why is there no profit sharing this year, okay? That's not what we're talking about. No. If you're interested in my little geek things that I purchased, I'm happy to share them. But geez, man, don't finance shame me. Jeez. All right. So I want to talk some coding because I had a weird series of events happen, and I have to give some credit where credit's due. I'm going to give credit to something that I never thought I'd give credit to, and I'm going to give credit to somebody who I seem to give credit to a lot. And the next time I run into this person, I will be buying them dinner. John, could your window stop changing size?
I'm sitting here watching. I'm like, what in the world is going on?
I haven't even touched it. I'm not even on the OBS machine. It's just bouncing back. I wonder if I take the focus off your. Let's see if that. Nope, that didn't change it.
I wasn't going to draw any attention to it because, again, most people are audio listeners, not video watchers. So carry on.
John's having some performance issues. Okay, I'll get to that. But let's start. Let me try to make sense of everything that happened. So I'm a fan of development. I mean, it's been a common theme because it just so happened that for the project we're working on, there was a big piece of it that a lot of developers were having trouble getting their head around. It really centered around permissions, and they were struggling understanding the architecture around the permissions. And so basically, they said, "Hey, can you code this piece?" And I said, "Yeah." And it just re-energized me as much as how much I love coding. Ironically enough, Eric Burns posted on Twitter, I think it was earlier this week, about, hey, if you love coding, don't own your own business because you won't code. don't own a coding group because you won't code.
I hate those. I hate those.
He's
Don't do it
not
because
wrong though, but he's not.
He's not wrong, but you're not coding because you choose to focus on other things in the business that you find more important. I hate blog posts that say you can't do this. Anytime I see a blog post where they're just saying this is the wrong way to live your life, I feel like, well, I'm glad you figured that out, but you need to put that more as a missive than as a.
No, that's not what he was saying. He was saying that if you think having a development group and owning a development group is going to afford you to just focus on development, you're sadly mistaken.
Oh yeah, no, you're an idiot if you think that.
Because there's so much involved with running a business that you find yourself, and this is the position I find myself in, is I can't assign myself code because I don't know how much time I'm going to have to code. And I have these little blocks of time where I can code, and I can't have the team dependent on me to finish something.
Okay, but what about something like mission control?
Okay, but that's okay. We can get into that. I mean, what about
mission? You have mission. You guys own mission control as an asset of, or your partners as an asset of DiegoDev. So you could at any point just go to mission control and work on it.
Right, and that's different, right? Because mission control is something that we don't have clients and timelines looming over us. So that's exactly what happens. I go to mission control and I work on that code base. I have a couple other projects that I go and work on that are all internal to DiegoDev. We don't have clients pushing us for timelines. We don't have other developers who are dependent on my piece being done for them to do their piece.
Yeah.
That's kind of the point, right? So if I had it my way, I would work on mission control 5 days a week, right? I mean, that would be what I coded all week long. But I don't have time to do that. I, again, have blocks where, I can break away from what I'm doing in this project to work on this project. Okay? So that's the point he was making, is if you really love coding and coding's the only thing you want to do, then be happy working for somebody as a coder. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. You make good money. You can be focused on coding and life is good. That was kind of the point of the tweet, and I agree with him. I think he's right. But you're taking me way off track from where I was going.
You don't say.
So again,
hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tom Rideout.
I'm a fan of development through and through. I mean, I have developers who I follow and watch just to watch them code. John is actually one of them. I love watching John debug stuff. Put John in a code base that he's never seen, tell him a problem that it's having, and just watch him go, and it's fascinating. I honestly, legitimately enjoy it. Just as much as I enjoy watching baseball, I enjoy watching good developers code. Another developer that I watch on YouTube, and I just watch this guy code, is George Hotz. I don't know. You might be familiar with who George Hotz is, Thomas. Yep, that's the guy. So he was
Hotz, for those who don't know, is the guy who created the original jailbreak for the iPhone.
Yep, and he was also famous for the fact that Sony tried to sue him for cracking the PlayStation.
Yes, and he beat the ever-living shit out of him.
Yeah. He's he's definitely got like Asperger's or something. He's on some spectrum, but the guy is an absolute fanatical developer.
He's a legend. I mean, his capabilities are unmatched. What he had done with the PlayStation was defeat the firmware that checked for the security certificate on games, so that he could sideload anything he wanted to. And he was able to do this through a USB device. He was able to do this without physical interaction with the hardware outside of plugging a USB key in. He's absolutely legendary.
And I mean, the way his brain works is just fascinating. He, until recently, watching his stream. I guess he's not part of Comma anymore, but he was actually running the development group around some, essentially anybody with a cell phone, being able to plug your cell phone into your car and having a self-driving car. It was fascinating stuff that he was doing. It was actually absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, his idea, his philosophy was, you have Teslas who do a crappy job of self-driving cars at a price point that, the majority of people in the US, or the majority of the people in the world, can't afford. Self-driving cars need to be cheaper and they need to be better than what they're implemented now. But that's not what his stream was about. His stream was, that would be it sometimes, but a lot of times it was him just trying to solve these like puzzles, like these philosophies or theories that were out there, these math puzzles, and he does it all in Python. He does it all with a Vim terminal. And my God, watching this guy code is just like, just hearing him tap on his keys and just had me missing Vim. I mean, had me missing Vim like big time, to the point where I'm like, I started dialing in my Vim RC file again because it had been so long since I'd actually worked in Vim. So that actually led me to, so credit where credit's due. Okay, so Michael Dorinda, who is one of the people
show.
I owe a lot of credit to this week. This was a minor thing. I heard him mention on one of his shows, his podcast, that he had stumbled across a new Vim command. He uses Vim. I think he actually uses Vim too. New Vim command, Control O. Now, if you don't understand Vim, the whole thing with Vim is you don't use your mouse. Everything's keyboard driven. There's all these. I mean, it's almost poetry when you code in Vim. Your fingers almost dance on the keyboard because there's all these key combinations and how you do things, and it's really a different way of coding. And if you've been a longtime Vim coder, it's very hard to understand how people don't code in Vim. And I'm one of those guys. Like I can't use any editors, and I know John's with me on this. I can't use editors if I can't at least have a Vim plugin. Now, the big mistake I made when I was just all Vim all the time is I had a super customized version of implementation of Vim. So that's the thing, is like you mold Vim to you. So whatever key combinations feel right for you, and there are plugins you can put. And I had over customized my Vim implementation. And where that kind of bit me in the ass is when I started using these other editors that had Vim plugins, like so much of it didn't work for me because my muscle memory wanted to do other things, and they just didn't work in these Vim editors. I had to really start to scale back to, my basic Vim skills before I could start appreciating some of these plugins. But Michael Dorinda talked about this new command called Control O. And essentially what Control O does is Vim has two main modes, insert mode and normal mode. Insert mode is just what it sounds like. That's how you type things into your terminal. Normal mode is where you move around in. And you're either in one or the other. Well, with Control O, what happens is you can be in insert mode, you hit Control O, and then you can throw down a key combination to perform an action. It performs that action and then puts you back into insert mode. It doesn't sound like it's all that much, but if you're a Vim person, that's super helpful because I'll constantly find myself typing. I'm like, oh shoot, I wanted to delete that word before I type. So now I just hit Control O, DW, and then boom, the word's gone and I'm back in insert mode. It's real helpful. And to kind of continue down the whole giving credit where credit is due, and this is where I never thought I would give credit to something. Um, so PHP Storm, which is the editor I've been using of late, has a Vim plugin, which is very feature complete. It's one of the better Vim plugins on editors I've seen. And to my delight, Control O works in PHP Storm. I was super excited. Yeah, super excited to find this out. But to kind of carry on with PHP Storm, I have been a long time not opponent of PHP Storm, but I've been vocal in the fact that I felt that PHP Storm made you a weaker developer. And I still kind of stand behind that because
I don't disagree at all. That's I find myself leaning on it like a crutch so often.
Right? I mean, after using PHP Storm, I like simple things like including use statements. It's like, oh, you forget that the IDE is doing that for you, or how you get around. So
that hasn't been my issue. My issue is navigation, control clicking on a method or a property and having it take you to the definition of that method or property is just been, it's how I code now.
It's magical, right? Yeah.
I code waiting for it to autofill from my helper file.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm like, what was this called? Is scene something, scene underscore, and was it this one or this one or this one or this one or it's this one? It's the, and then now with implementing stricter typing on my code, it pops up and says, hey, you specified something here that's not going to get pulled correctly. You need to specify the right type of object here. And I'm like, oh, right. Which is a double-edged sword. Yeah, it's a crutch, but as long as I have the crutch, I'm good.
Right, and that's the thing. I mean, there's nothing that's...
It's not weaker. It's using the tools that are at your disposal.
No, it's weaker though, because it's for a seasoned developer, it's a crutch.
And he's saying seasoned like an iron pan is a cast iron pan is seasoned, where it's just this is the tool you use despite an air fryer existing.
Right, it's a crutch for a seasoned developer. For a underclassmen developer, it's ignorance because they'll never learn.
It could really hinder. It could really hinder, and I think the place where it really would hinder a beginner developer is trying to transition to a different language, where certain things don't get taken care of for you.
Yeah. That's that, or a different editor where it doesn't take care of it, and all of a sudden you realize, hey, wait a minute, why doesn't this work?
But I have to say, having done all of this work in React lately, it has made learning. A good IDE has made learning React and GraphQL easier because the IDE understands GraphQL and understands what I've imported in JavaScript and React, and it says, hey, this object here can't take that type of thing. And I go, okay, why? And I pull up the documentation and look into it more. But before I run into an error that just says literal garbage on the screen, it just says can't compile, here's a billion things that went wrong. Before that happens, my IDE says you should look at this documentation page because this has an explanation of why what you did is wrong. And that's where I really appreciate PHP Storm, is that it can describe the problem, exactly where the problem is going to occur before it actually occurs, and you can learn from it while you're coding instead of while it's compiling. Okay. So I understand what you're saying is that as a beginner developer, it could really hinder you. But as a beginner developer, it'll also prevent a lot of mistakes that are just going to eat time.
I think Thomas just took both sides of the argument in the past 5 minutes.
In PHP, if you don't have a closing semicolon, then PHP will error out eventually, like 5 or 6 lines after where the semicolon should be. It'll say, okay, I was expecting a semicolon and we took way too long to get there. But in your editor, you've got your coding standards applied to it, and it's going to say right here is where a semicolon goes. So you're either missing a semicolon or you're breaking the coding standards. And that helps tighten things up for learners a bit, I think. But then there are other use cases where it's auto-including use and it's auto-including some mapping, or it reads your autoloader and knows that stuff's going to get autoloaded or not autoloaded. I mean, PHP developers now, new PHP developers now, won't understand the magic that the autoloader is doing from Composer, because we wrote PHP in the day where you couldn't just say use this file; you had to also include the file you were going to use.
Yep.
But is that a dead skill now? Is that just a skill that doesn't matter?
Should be.
But Composer is not part of the PHP project. The autoloader is, and so if you want to rely on autoloading, should you know how the autoloader works?
I'm trying to get through a story.
You should get to your story faster and stop teasing me like this.
Holy crap!
Stop teasing me. You took both sides. You changed your mind halfway through your.
You're arguing with yourself, man. Well, that's a good point, Eric. I'm going to counterpoint your point with this point. Don't go anywhere, Thomas. Oh, we hurt his feelings.
He's going for another beer.
Thomas walked away. Oh man. I hate it when Thomas's feelings. Anyway, I'm going to finish my story. So, PHP Storm.
Please do, because you still haven't gotten to. You're going to buy somebody dinner, and we're 30 minutes into the story, and we still don't know who you're going to buy dinner for.
Well, it's not this story that has this person getting dinner. It's a whole nother story.
So this is like a sub-query of the original
you started this whole thing.
No. Well, I started.
Who are you buying dinner for?
I give credit where credit is due. So
who are you?
And you want to buy somebody dinner.
Is it me?
Get to that story. I'm going to get that story. I told you I had a whole show here. All you have to do is sit back and relax. Okay, so real fast, I'm going to try to wrap this up real quick. PHP Storm almost never teaches me anything new. Occasionally it'll say, hey, you need some dot blocks here. Hey, you don't need double quotes. You can use single quotes. I'm appreciative of this information, but it rarely teaches me anything new. For the first time ever, it taught me something new. It showed me where it actually walked me through using the null coalescing operator, a null coalescing operator.
Null coalescing operator.
Yeah, and I remember it come out in one of these 7 releases. I don't think it was 7.0, but it was one of the 7 releases that came out. And I remember reading about it. I'm like, okay, that could be helpful. Whatever. And for the first time, I had written out this if statement, and with not null. And PHP Storm slowly walked me through and said, hey, you can optimize this statement by doing this and doing this. Then the final thing it said is, hey, you can optimize this statement by using null coalescing operator. And I'm like, oh my God. And it went from doing like a 3-line if statement to a 1-line if statement to a parameter in a database insert. And it was just like, oh, what? So PHP Storm, I give you a hard time about making developers weaker, but this was an exception to that rule. I appreciate the fact that you led me down this road and taught me null coalescent operator. Very helpful command.
That story was fucking awful.
It would have been over like 20 minutes ago had you not gone down whatever rabbit hole you went down.
All you had to do was not talk on your own podcast, and it would have been a smooth sailing.
All right. So I have another big story, but I think it's going to eat up the rest of the time.
What are you buying dinner for?
I'm buying dinner for
that conversation about buying somebody dinner because you appreciated something, and
he owes both of us dinner now, and probably a couple listeners.
You guys are so mean to me. Why do I sit here and do this?
I learned it from you, Dad.
Man, it looks like I even forgot to put the link on here. I meant to put the link on here. Anyways, I had to meet with a client and some patent lawyers this week.
Ooh.
This was a very interesting experience for me. So for the
Now,
first
is
time,
this your first patent lawyer meeting?
yep. So this is the
So
first time I've ever kind of done this sort of had this sort of conversation.
I did one of these before, and it is rough.
It was super rough. I was explaining it to John. So I I get what the client's doing. I can appreciate it, especially after the lawyer was kind of explaining it, and I understand what the client was going for. But some interesting things came up, and like there were some very uncomfortable times in the meeting. One of the biggest things that came up that clearly the lawyer wasn't aware of was that working we weren't the same company that our client was, that the client was contracting with us to build their product. That became very uncomfortable. And the lawyer almost asked me to leave the meeting. I mean, even to the
Not
point where
surprising.
he wouldn't share certain documents with me, um, which I was fine with. Now, all of us are pretty open sourcey people, right?
That's what I was going to ask, because when I did this, I walked in the meeting and I told the lawyer, first of all, I fundamentally disagree with software patents. However, in my role as an employee, I am here to support the development of a software patent. If you feel like my opinion is out of place, you're going to have to let me know so that I can adjust to the business environment of this kind of thing, opposing my moral position.
How did that work out for you?
It worked out fine. I mean, I basically just said, hey, if I say something that isn't in the business's interest because I think it's morally the right position, you have to say clearly to me that is a moral position and does not apply to this conversation.
Okay. I didn't.
And that was what we got
Honest-
to, basically.
Honestly, I would have felt that I would have been overstepping the line if I had. So I wasn't there to inject any of my opinions or beliefs. This was clear. This was strictly between my client and this lawyer. I was there just as a source of information. So nobody asked my opinion as far as whether they thought they should be pursuing this, and that was perfectly fine with me.
So I have to preface every conversation I have with, you understand that this is about me.
Where things got really, so that was the first time things got awkward. Then things got even more awkward when I told him, I'm like, well, listen, the products we're currently building for him, the products we're currently maintaining for him, like 98% of this stuff is built on open source. It's built on PHP, which is open source, MySQL, which is open source, running on Nginx, which is open source. The new stuff is using frameworks that are open source, Laravel frameworks, which use packages that are open source. Patent lawyers,
Yeah, they don't like that.
freaking hate that word. And it was even brought up. It's like, how difficult would it be to redo what you've done without using the open source components? And it's
Literally
like,
not possible.
we're not. Your client does not want to pay for that. Trust me. It's like, it was crazy. So then there was like this sense of frustration from the lawyer when he asked me what licenses were used, and I'm like, well, I can give you the high level licenses, but we now use Composer and npm install, and we're installing these packages. I've installed dependencies so I can't tell you all the licenses that are being used. I would have to do some research on that. He's like, you have to know the licenses. I'm like, okay, I can get you the licenses. I just can't sit here and recite them to you.
I can. Apache, MIT, GPL, 2.
Nope, there are more licenses than that. But
well,
the point was what components were using which licenses, and that's what I told him. I'm like, the majority of the components use MIT, from Laravel to a lot of the packages that are included are MIT licenses. There's some Apache, and there's actually a few other sprinkled in there. This is where I owe somebody dinner. So I come back from this meeting, because I promised my client, I'm like, I'll get you a list of all the licenses we're using in the new product. So I come back and I think to myself, this won't be that difficult. I'll write a script that will go through my composer file. Packages has API endpoints. I'll hit those API endpoints. I'll get the license and I'll create a list. I got that done. Not the lock file, just the composer JSON. I got all that done in about an hour. So the first layer.
Composer
Don't
licenses.
do it. Don't do. Why do I bother? Why do I bother having this fucking conversation, man? So, anyways, I get through it with the script.
I'll edit that out.
No, don't edit it out because you already fucked it up. So, whatever. I get through the script in about an hour, and I got the first layer done. Right now, I got to figure out how to do dependencies, and I got to figure out how to do npm packages. And just out of pure coincidence, just out of pure luck, I happen to be talking to, again, friend of the show, Michael Dorinda, who we've already mentioned in the show. I'm talking to him on Telegram. I'm like, hey, am I crazy for writing a script, or do you know a better way of doing it? And sure enough, he comes back with a package, and then a couple seconds later, he's like, hey, you don't even have to use that package for Composer. Composer has a function in it called Composer Licenses that generates all the licenses that you're using, including all the dependencies. I'm like, that was fantastic. So I wasted about an hour and a half coding, but that was fine. So then of course I tell him, I'm like, do you have anything for npm? And sure enough, he comes back with npm license crawler, which is just a global install you do, and it essentially does the same thing. But yeah, so Michael Dorinda is the person I'm going to buy dinner the next time I see him, just because he's always there giving helpful information. He's always there when I need to, bounce something off somebody. And
Michael, he owes you dinner and like 5 or 10 drinks, because this was a 50-minute conversation just to get the fact that you were going to dinner with him.
All right, fuck you guys. You guys can finish up.
He's so angry.
Oh, you don't even know where to start on how pissed off I am right now. So
why are you so pissed off?
Finishing up the show.
Why are you so mad? I don't get it. I honestly don't.
It's been one of those episodes. We have all thrown off our headphones in anger this episode.
I can't say I threw mine off in anger. I threw mine off in copying.
It was mock anger.
Sure.
Eric.
Thomas, please finish.
I love you.
You have plenty to say. Finish the show, babe.
Eric, I love you.
You've been listening to episode 174 of PHP Ugly.
That's not the number.
The final episode.
147. I said 174.
The next episode, John and I will be dead, and Eric will be on the lam.
Why is it going to be on a lamb? That's kind of weird.
It's really a personal preference thing. Well, yeah, so I think, you know who else is really upset today? Julian Assange.
Good transition there.
Thank you.
I told you earlier, I don't think this is newsworthy. The guy gets arrested all the time.
He has been living in the embassy for 7 years now. This is his first arrest in the last 7 years. Yeah, he got arrested and he's being extradited to America, and I guess we're gonna put the crazy guy who looks like Frodo stole the ring from him on trial. But that's just the beginning of doom and gloom.
I guess so torn on that one. Between should he be treated like the media or treated like a traitor?
No, he's a traitor.
Why do you think he's a traitor?
He scheduled the release of documents for the purpose of political influence as opposed for the freedom of information. So he has managed, edited, and released on a schedule so that the information that he releases and makes public has the impact he wants it to have, as opposed to the fact that it's just free information. He is not. Originally, WikiLeaks was defined as just a dumping spot. You could take any file and just dump it on WikiLeaks and it would be published. He took that as some kind of personal empowerment and started to audit and control what was released on WikiLeaks, and eventually turned into an underground political influence instead of just an altruistic person. He's clearly not altruistic.
Yeah, I was hearing on NPR today that he actually encouraged people to get jobs at places like the CIA to steal documentation or to help him get access to their servers or the data they had. And WikiLeaks was supposed to be was I guess the idea was to release information from all governments, but it primarily targets the US.
Yeah, it targets the US. It favors the current administration. And when you submit something to him, you're not supposed to expect it to get released in the form that you sent it to him. He is an editor. So there's people like Edward Snowden, who I think is a hero. But then there's somebody like Julian Assange, who I think was a hero and was corrupted by the power that he was given. So, but I also think that the original charges that he was charged with were bullshit too. He was charged with rape under a bizarre Swedish law that stated that you had to have consent for essentially every component of a sexual act, whether or not you're currently engaged in sex. So the fact that he didn't use a condom constituted rape because he didn't say, is it okay if I don't use a condom? So it's a lot of handfuls of a lot of bullshit, in my opinion. But what's not bullshit, we talked about earlier, GeoHot made a lot of progress in defining the ownership rights of people who've purchased devices like the iPhone, like the PlayStation 4. But there's still a lot of unknowns about the world of software. When you purchase software, you're actually just licensing it. You don't really own it anymore. I think maybe WinRAR, you might own it when you purchase it, but no one ever has, so there's no way to find out. But Microsoft has announced that they're shutting down their ebook library. And as a result, they will be recalling rights to all of the books anyone has purchased through that system. The upside of the whole story is that they are reimbursing people for the books that they're having taken away from them. But the downside is this is just another example of depending on a system that isn't going to be around forever, investing your money in it, and then having it just retract rights away from you all over again.
Interesting.
Any thoughts, Eric? You still steaming?
Yeah. Any opinion on the Stack Overflow survey? Do we care about this?
We were asked about it.
I don't know. That's why I wanted to try to make some time to talk about it. I hadn't looked at it yet, so I stopped caring about these surveys so much. But Stack Overflow is probably one of the better ones to pay attention to because, well, I thought because of the diversity, but I guess it's not as diverse as I thought it was. But
Nope. It is not when you're looking through it.
Well, to me, Stack Overflow almost looks finished. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like every question has an answer that is considered the definitive answer until the next version of something comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the people that contribute to these surveys are developers that create content on Stack Overflow. So when it says the current hot language is Rust, that's because that's the currently least documented language to resolve problems on. So the people replying to your survey are going to be Rust developers because that's where they get all their Stack Overflow points.
Interesting.
I love the Stack Overflow survey, but I think it's so biased in regards to its audience that there's no valid data to actually get out of it that isn't just common sense.
There's common sense. Like, I'm still shocked that such a high percentage is white male. I mean, I know that it is, but the fact that it's just confirmed, you would think things are changing there. But I don't understand why questions are asked like sexual orientation. What does that have to do with development?
Hmm.
And
I can't. I hate the fact that they bulk together JavaScript with other languages, because even the framework. So if you look at the programming language, JavaScript's number one, because everybody who does anything in any language does that language in JavaScript. I mean, that's just the way it is. The same thing with the web frameworks. It's like you have jQuery, React, Angular are the top 3 web frameworks. That's because those are running in other frameworks half the time. You have Vue.js on there, Express is on there. Look at that. I mean, there are all these JavaScript frameworks. It's because they're running inside of, well, I mean, not always exclusively inside of another framework, but they run in Flask, they run in Laravel, they run in Ruby on Rails. And so the fact that they lump these two things together is frustrating. I am surprised to see that Flask looks like it has more people using it than Laravel, which really, I mean, I guess Flask is a fairly minimum framework for Python developers, and Python is a very popular language. So maybe it doesn't surprise me as much as I initially thought it did, but yeah, no real surprises though. Like you said, what is Panda?
Well, primary operating system being Windows, 45% of professional developers. That was kind of shocking.
not just shocking, but also horseshit.
Mm.
There's no way that is an accurate reflection in any way of the actual number of users. I work in an environment where people can choose their operating system, and it's Mac and Linux only. Ever. There's never, ever been a single Windows machine. And I've worked in one environment that was a Windows environment, and I moved to Linux as fast as possible on it. But
well, you don't think that they're saying that their development machines are Windows though? Because I mean, it's not very clear what they're asking.
Even a development machine shouldn't be Windows.
No, I tell you, in enterprise, it's Windows. Yeah, that doesn't shock me. I mean, if they're including your development machine and not environments you're deployed on,
no, it's developer's primary operating system. So whatever you're using to develop.
But then if you look at the developer roles, it's a 51% are full stack developer, 50% are back end, 32% are front end. Then I mean, just the first 3 results don't add up. So that's a multiple choice. Are you a back end developer, a front end developer, a full stack developer? If you're a back end and front end, you're a full stack developer. That should equal 100% total. And it doesn't. I mean, it's fun numbers to look at, but honest to God, Pornhub does a better job of breaking down analytics than Stack Overflow does.
Oh, here we are. Most popular development environment, Visual Studio Code. What?
That's not too surprising.
Vim is up there. Vim is. Wait, I must be missing something. Vim is more than PHP Storm or PyCharm. What? That's a little surprising. I didn't realize there were still that many people using Vim.
But let's say that you were in a business that had to make business decisions based off of this information. Would you trust it in the slightest bit to make a business decision?
Well, wait, when you read underneath, a popular choice for DevOps and SREs is Vim. So even though we're looking at web developers, which
Right, that is the other thing. We're looking at a narrow scope that includes literally every job that touches a computer, because they have Stack Overflow for Excel.
How are organizations using blockchain technology? 80% not at all. Non-currency applications are 12.7%. Wow.
See, that's not true. That there are not 20% of companies using the blockchain right now. That's bizarro land.
Interesting.
Do you know Steam, the video game platform?
Sure.
Steam has a hardware survey for what hardware you're using, and it's a thing that executes on your computer. That's what I would like to see, where you just give Stack Overflow your GitHub link and it determines everything from there. Where it's like, here's all your includes, here's the stuff you actually work with, here's the stuff you just use. Don't just ask the questions, because people are not going to give you straight answers. People who really want to be involved in blockchain are going to lie and say, oh yeah, dude, every day, totally, all the time.
So do I need to give Stack Overflow access to my camera so I can determine my race and gender and sexual orientation?
No, just wait for Facebook to buy it.
Wow,
And
it's
like
so much here.
it's like a 500-page questionnaire too. I
Jeez,
don't know
who answers all these questions.
Right. Who's going to go through this crap? It's a 20-minute survey.
Wow, there's so much information here. Yeah, in the day, I don't know what it really does for anybody.
I saw it, and I included it as a ticket.
Oh, wait a minute,
And I'm like, this is not useful information.
John, maybe we should be adding more credit to this survey than we thought. Look at what we should be paying back-end developers. And yeah, I think we need to have a talk with our team. Oh, never mind.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has
don't
been
click on the United
episode
States.
Yeah, I was going to say, you
of
didn't
PHP
switch over.
Ugly.
Yeah, I didn't switch over to the United States, so don't do that. Oh man, that's crazy.
That's a big disparity.
That's a huge disparity. This is why PHP gets offshored all the time, because of that. I mean, it's 50%, man. Oh man, that is insane. That's insane.
I'm getting paid less than an educator?
Scientists globally.
I'm getting paid less than an academic researcher? That's weird.
Wow. Okay, so I need to ask for a raise.
Wow,
25,000 respondents. Yeah, it's like I said, just seeing how much other full stack developers are getting paid makes me know that this is bullshit. I was working in San Diego and didn't get anywhere close to this. And San Diego is like the third highest in the nation for salaries.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah.
Should we be wrapping it up? I feel like we should be at time. We haven't thanked our Patreons yet. We should probably do
Well,
that.
I mean, this came out a couple weeks ago. Got one more thing. Just if you're running Apache or if you're in a shared environment,
Oh yeah.
make sure Apache's updated, because if somebody can get a file onto your web server, they could also have root access to it. So if you're in a shared environment, it's even worse because you don't know what other people are doing in that environment.
If you're in a shared environment, just stop it. What are you doing?
I know, yeah. Like, yeah, why are you still in the shared environment, first off?
There are most developers I know, most new developers wouldn't even know what a shared environment was, and when you described it to them, they'd be like, "Oh, like a dorm room?" Like,
You say that, but there's so many people, like my stepdad, who should know better, still uses shared hosting. But
it's
he's doing it.
mind-boggling.
He's not doing it professionally. It's a hobby site that he does. But I guess just because it's so damn cheap to throw your site on a shared host.
Or a Droplr for like $1.50 a month,
Yeah.
or a Droplet. What's the name of that company?
DigitalOcean.
DigitalOcean.
Yeah, but then you have to know how to maintain a server. You have to know how to spin one up, how to have Apache installed.
I don't think
You
you
know,
do
these-
anymore. I think they have managed droplets now.
No, they don't.
The shared hosts, you FTP your files up and you're done. So that's a hard one. If you are on a shared host, seriously look at it, make sure they're updated. Hopefully, if it's a big company, they are. But there is a vulnerability. There were actually two that came out, but this one was more critical.
All right. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all to our Patreons. We really, really appreciate it. This has been episode 147. If you can believe it, we're 3 episodes away from 150. My name is Tom Rideout.
I'm Eric Van Johnson.
He is pissed off Eric Van Johnson, not just Eric Van Johnson. I'm John Congdon.
Keep it ugly.
Keep it ugly.
Keep it ugly. I didn't want to step on you guys. Aren't I nice?
You're wonderful. All right.
I'm sorry, Eric.
Some music playing in the background here. Oh, no. Did I not have music going today?
You did.
Shit.
At the beginning, you did.
It's
Did
better
I?
than having it going
Yeah.
through the whole episode.
That's Pretzel, right?
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's running now.
No, but you had it on at the very beginning.
Oh, maybe it is running now. Maybe it was just switching
Good, man.
songs. Yeah, it was just switching songs. All right.
I stopped my recording. Hope that's okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop mine too. Throw that on Dropbox. Delete this stuff. Actually, I got it. I'll be back.
And you're all stuck with me. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Oh.
How mad is he?
I don't understand why. Eric, come back. That's nothing to be mad about.
Is it compounded by the fact that I questioned his spending on display devices?
I'm sure that was a big part of it. But the whole license thing, I didn't understand getting bent out of shape over.
That was a good episode.
And just to say I was right, it's all in your composer.lock file.
Is it?
Yeah, even down to all your sub dependencies, because your lock file has all of that information in there.
I don't
you
see the
could have
licenses.
yeah. Search for license.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. You know what, though? It doesn't have the version of the license. If you do composer license, it gives you the specific version of the license.
No, that version is the version of the software.
Oh. I wonder if composer catches license changes. Damn, that was such a perfect segue too, but you got mad at me, so I couldn't do it. I was going to talk about the 996 license. Have you seen that?
I have not.
It's a license that says that you can't work in this software cannot be used in an environment that mistreats its employees.
Oh. Eric,
But it
while you're... Oh, good.
What's that? You want me to kill the recording?
No, we